There's a kind of heartbreak that doesn't scream. It just lingers quiet heavy, like the sound of footsteps fading down a hallway you no longer walk. You used to trace their name like it was a promise, on coffee cups, in late-night texts, in the way your voice softened whenever they entered the room. You believed in forever, not because they gave you every reason to, but because you saw a version of them that you thought was real. You stayed long after the warmth disappeared, after the laughter turned into silence, after their eyes stopped looking at you like you were home. You stayed because of how it used to be, because once upon a time they made you feel alive, because you thought love meant never letting go, because you believed, truly believed, that if you just held on tighter, loved harder, they would come back. They would change. They would remember. So you waited. Waited through broken promises and half-hearted apologies. Waited through the quiet cancellations, the unexplained distance, the emotional vanishing acts. And every time they came back, even if only halfway, you welcomed them with open arms and a hopeful heart. Because you weren't just holding on to them. You were holding on to who you were when they loved you. You were holding on to a version of yourself that felt worthy, desired, important. But slowly, almost invisibly, you began to disappear. You began to shrink so they could feel bigger. You softened your voice so they wouldn't feel threatened. You stopped asking for what you needed because asking only brought arguments or silence. And here's what hurts the most. You began to convince yourself that this was enough, that this was love, that crumbs were a feast, that the occasional "I love you" could undo the nights you cried yourself to sleep, that their presence, even when distant, was better than their absence. But deep down, you knew. You knew that love shouldn't feel like begging, that love shouldn't require you to become less of yourself, that staying shouldn't feel like surrendering your light piece by piece. The moment you realized this wasn't love anymore, wasn't loud, it came in the quiet, in the way your chest stopped fluttering when they texted, in the way your tears felt familiar, rehearsed, in the way your heart whispered, "I miss me." Letting go isn't something you do all at once. It's something that happens in fragments. The first time, you say no and mean it. The first time, you don't answer. The first night you sleep peacefully, alone. And when you finally walk away, not in anger, not in bitterness, but in tired, sacred clarity, that is not defeat, that is not giving up, that is love for you. Because loving someone should never cost you your own reflection. And the moment you chose yourself was the first moment you truly understood what love could be. There's a story no one ever asks you to tell. It's the one where you're always the one fixing things, always the glue, always the steady hand, the one who absorbs the chaos so the other person can stay calm, the one who says it's fine, even when your soul is trembling. You learned early how to patch emotional wounds with your own silence, how to turn your ache into reassurance. You smiled while you bled because you believed that love meant carrying both your pain and theirs. They called you strong. They called you patient. They called you the one who always understands. But no one ever asked if you were tired. No one ever wondered how it felt to be the one who's always okay. Because you have to be. You were the peacekeeper. You bent your needs to accommodate theirs. You held the weight of their insecurities, their moods, their confusion, and turned it all into love. You held space over and over and over again. And in return, they gave you convenience. They gave you apologies stitched together with excuses. They gave you just enough affection to keep you hoping, but never enough consistency to make you feel secure. You saw their wounds and tried to become their medicine. You saw their brokenness and tried to become their home. But while you were busy saving them, who was saving you? You stopped expressing your pain because it only led to defensiveness. You stopped sharing your needs because they made you feel like a burden. You started to believe that asking for more was asking for too much. So you carried the relationship on your back, hoping that if you just kept going, kept loving, kept fixing, they would one day see you. Really see you. Not just as the caretaker of their chaos, but as someone worthy of being cared for too. But that day never came. And here's what hurts in the quiet. It's not just that they didn't show up. It's that you kept showing up anyway. For a relationship that asked you to disappear in order to survive. You became a version of yourself that could only whisper, only accommodate, only endure. And somewhere along the way, you forgot what it felt like to simply be loved without having to earn it. Letting go for someone like you doesn't come easy because you were raised to keep the peace, trained to hold everything together, conditioned to believe that love meant work, sacrifice, silence. But you're allowed to be held too. You're allowed to be listened to. You're allowed to rest in a love that feels like home, not a house you're constantly rebuilding. Letting go doesn't mean you stopped loving them. It means you finally started loving yourself, not as a role, not as a function, but as a soul who deserves softness too. And maybe the bravest thing you'll ever do is stop being their savior and start being your own. They told you what your life should look like long before you were old enough to question it. You'll make something of yourself. You'll do what we couldn't. You'll be someone we can be proud of. And you nodded because you loved them, because they sacrificed so much. Because how could you say no to people who gave you everything? So, you followed the script. You went to school. You chose the safe major. You said no to the messy, uncertain dreams, the ones that made your eyes light up. You traded freedom for stability, joy for approval. And on the outside, it worked. They were proud. You were praised. You had the title, the job, the life they dreamed of for you. But inside, something ached. Something whispered that this isn't it. That you've been wearing someone else's dream, like a suit that doesn't quite fit. You try to convince yourself that comfort is enough. That gratitude should be enough. That their pride is enough to make the emptiness feel meaningful. But you can't fake joy forever. There are nights you lie awake wondering if you're wasting your one short life living someone else's. You wonder what it would have been like to write that novel, to start that small bakery, to take that job abroad, to say yes to the voice inside you, the one you've silenced for so long, you're scared it forgot how to speak. And then comes the guilt. Because what kind of person resents being loved too much? What kind of child looks at their parents' sacrifice and says, I want something else? The answer, a human one. A real one. One who knows that love doesn't mean self-abandonment. That honoring your parents doesn't require betraying yourself. You are not ungrateful for wanting to feel alive. You are not selfish for choosing a life that looks different from what they pictured. And the people who truly love you, they don't just want your obedience. They want your happiness, even if they don't understand it at first. Letting go of the expectations placed on you isn't about turning your back on your family. It's about facing yourself and finally saying, I have the right to become who I am. You are not the sum of other people's hopes. You are the wild, sacred possibility of your own becoming. And if that means disappointing others in the short term, to stop disappointing yourself for the rest of your life, then let that be your quiet revolution. They said you made it. You had the job title, the LinkedIn updates, the subtle nods of approval from relatives who once doubted you. You had the calendar full of meetings, the emails with important decisions, the polite nod from coworkers in the hallway. You were playing the part and playing it well. You smiled on cue, delivered what was asked, hit the targets, showed up on time every day. But inside, you felt like you were vanishing, not all at once, not in a dramatic collapse, but slowly, like a dimming light bulb you didn't even realize was losing power. The spark you used to have the color you brought into rooms faded. The laughter that once came so easily now feels like performance. There was a time you imagined changing the world. Now you barely have the energy to change your bed sheets after work. There was a time Mondays felt like possibility. Now they feel like survival. And the worst part? You feel guilty for feeling this way. Because you know you're lucky. Because others would love to have what you have. Because you worked so hard to get here. How dare you not feel fulfilled? But guilt isn't the same as purpose. And no amount of stability will fill the space meant for joy. You remember glimpses of when life used to move you. The music you used to play. The photos you used to take. The stories you used to write in the quiet corners of your day. You remember being lit up from the inside when success wasn't measured by output, but by alignment. Now you scroll. You eat. You sleep. You perform. And repeat. You're surviving. But you're not. There's a kind of letting go that doesn't mean walking away from the job. It means walking away from the lie that this is all there is. It means making room, even if just a corner of your day, for the things that bring you back to life. A brushstroke, a page in a notebook, a walk without purpose, a sunrise watched just because. You don't have to burn everything down, but you do have to stop pretending this is enough if it isn't. You owe yourself honesty. You owe yourself permission. You owe yourself breath. Letting go isn't always quitting the job. Sometimes it's quitting the performance and remembering that your soul was never designed to fit in spreadsheets. You are not just what you do. You are who you are when you are most alive. It's a quiet kind of heartbreak the moment you realize you can't keep being what they need without forgetting what you need. You love them. That's never been the question. You showed up when they called, listened to the same story on repeat, held their tears with hands that were already full. You were their anchor in every storm, even when you were drowning silently. They leaned on you. And at first it felt like love. It felt like purpose. It felt like being needed was the same as being seen. But over time, you began to disappear beneath the weight of being everything to someone who gave you so little room to be anything else. You started canceling your plans because they were falling apart. You bit your tongue every time their words pierced a little too deep. You became their emotional emergency room, available, responsive, always on call. And one day you woke up and didn't recognize your own reflection. You hadn't really laughed in weeks. You hadn't said no without guilt in months. You hadn't felt rested in years. But you stayed. Because walking away would make you cold. Because drawing boundaries would make you selfish. Because saying "I can't keep doing this" would make you the villain in their story. So, you tried to do both, care for them and keep pieces of yourself alive. But love doesn't work like that. Real love doesn't ask you to set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. So the moment came, the one you dreaded. The conversation you rehearsed 1,000 times in your head. I need space. I can't keep carrying this. I love you, but this is hurting me. And their face changed. The warmth left. The silence arrived. You were prepared for sadness, but not the guilt. Not the way it clung to your chest like wet clothing. Not the way your mind replayed their disappointment on a loop. But here's what no one told you. Disappointing others doesn't mean you're doing something wrong. It might just mean you're finally doing something right for you. You are not obligated to break yourself into pieces just so someone else can feel whole. You are not cruel for choosing rest. You are not heartless for saying, "Not this time." You are not wrong for needing to breathe. Letting go of someone's approval isn't easy, especially when you've built your identity around being dependable, good, available. But you deserve to be more than a support system. You deserve to be a soul living, expanding, not just surviving. Letting go doesn't mean closing your heart. It means opening it to yourself. There's a moment, not dramatic, not loud, when you realize you don't need to fight anymore. No more proving. No more pleasing. No more shaping yourself into something softer, smaller, easier to hold. You're just done. Not out of anger. Not out of bitterness. But out of something quieter. Something deeper. Out of the tender truth that whispers, "I want to come home to myself." You've spent years twisting into versions of you that were easier for others to love. The agreeable one, the reliable one, the quiet one. You gave them your time, your care, your heart, until your soul ran on reserve, and your reflection felt like someone else. But now you're learning how to listen again. To the breath between obligations, to the ache beneath your performance, to the tiny voice, timid but still alive, that says, "I miss who I used to be." And maybe that used to be wasn't perfect, but she laughed more. He rested more. They dreamed without apology. You're not starting from scratch. You're starting from truth. From the knowledge that love isn't supposed to drain you. That joy isn't something you earn, it's something you return to. That letting go isn't a failure, it's a form of faith. Faith in life beyond this pain. Faith in something softer waiting. Faith in yourself. So you begin again, slowly, without the pressure to have it all figured out. You start with a walk in the morning light, a cup of tea held with both hands, a playlist that makes your chest rise and fall, a journal entry that says, "I don't know who I am right now, but I'm listening. You stop clinging to the love that left. You stop waiting for the apology that never came. You stop trying to fit into spaces that require your silence to stay. And you begin to breathe. You begin to realize that peace isn't found in others seeing your worth. It's found in you refusing to forget it. Letting go was never about pushing people away. It was about no longer pushing yourself away. So if you're here now, heart-cracked open eyes, finally tired enough to see clearly, this is your invitation to return, to rebuild, to believe again not in them, but in you. Because the most sacred love story you'll ever live is the one where you finally come home to yourself.